You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you just know someone looks effortlessly chic, utterly put together, and frankly, like they've just stepped off the pages of a high fashion magazine? And then there's the other side of the coin, that niggling thought that maybe, just maybe, some of your own wardrobe choices are, well, not quite hitting that mark. What if I told you there are specific colors that, without you even realizing it, might be subtly undermining your entire look, making you appear less polished, less sophisticated, and yes, less expensive? We're talking about those hues that whisper bargain bin instead of boutique. If you've ever wondered why some outfits just don't have that certain je ne sais quoi, or why your impeccably chosen pieces sometimes fall flat, then you absolutely have to stick around. By the end of this, you'll have the insider knowledge to transform your wardrobe, elevate your entire aesthetic, and project that undeniable air of luxury, no matter your budget. Trust me, the final color reveal is the one that will genuinely shock you, and understanding it will completely change the way you shop forever. Don't miss out on unlocking this style secret. Faded neons. Let's kick things off with a color family that, for many, evokes a sense of playful vibrancy, but in reality, can often be a major culprit in making an outfit look, dare I say, cheap. I'm talking about faded neons, not the intentional, bold, electric neons that are making a specific, deliberate statement in a very high fashion, avant garde way. No, those are a different beast entirely. I'm referring to those slightly muted, almost sickly, fluorescent shades that have lost their initial punch. Imagine a lime green that isn't quite vibrant, or a hot pink that feels like it's been through the wash too many times, even when it's brand new. There's a certain artificiality to these hues that just doesn't translate well into an expensive aesthetic. They often have a synthetic quality to them, an unrefined pigment that screams fast fashion production line rather than atelier craftsmanship. When a fabric is dyed in one of these less than stellar neon shades, it rarely holds its richness or depth. Instead, it can look washed out, tired, and simply lacking in the kind of sophisticated saturation that characterizes truly luxurious garments. It's like a promise of brightness that never quite delivers, leaving you with a visual disappointment that detracts from the overall perceived value of your clothes. You might think you're adding a pop of color, but what you're actually doing is introducing a visual element that cheapens everything around it. The eye is drawn to the lack of quality in the dye rather than the design or fit of the garment itself. This is particularly true in knitwear or structured pieces, where a more subdued and refined color palette is usually expected. Choosing a faded neon is like serving champagne in a plastic cup. It just doesn't feel right, and it certainly doesn't elevate the experience. Avoid these weak, watery brights if you're aiming for an expensive, polished vibe. Muted pastels. Next up, we delve into a color territory that can be incredibly tricky. Muted pastels. Now, before you gasp, let me clarify. There's a world of difference between a rich, sophisticated dusty rose or a creamy, elegant sky blue, and the kind of muted pastels I'm talking about here. The problematic ones are those that lack clarity, those that seem to be a bit hazy or indistinct. Think of a baby blue that looks like it's been mixed with a touch of gray, or a lavender that feels more muddy than ethereal. These shades often come across as indecisive, as if the dye process wasn't quite sure what it wanted to achieve. They don't have the clean, crisp vibrancy of a well-executed pastel, nor do they possess the deliberate depth of a truly sophisticated neutral. Instead, they sit in this awkward middle ground, often appearing drab and lifeless. When worn, these muted pastels can actually wash out your complexion, making you look tired or simply unremarkable. They don't reflect light in a flattering way, and they don't have that visual punch that makes an item feel intentional and well designed. Often, these are the colors you see in mass-produced items where the cost of dyes is a significant factor, and corners might be cut to achieve a certain trend-driven aesthetic without investing in true color quality. A truly expensive pastel, on the other hand, will have a beautiful, almost luminous quality to it, a clear and precise hue that feels fresh and elevated. So next time you're eyeing a pastel, ask yourself, does this color sing or does it just kind of mumble? If it's mumbling, it's likely making your entire look less expensive. Harsh orange. All right, let's talk about a color that can be incredibly polarizing, and often, for good reason, harsh orange. Not the deep, burnished autumnal oranges that evoke richness and warmth, or the playful, sophisticated tangerine shades that are carefully balanced. I'm specifically pinpointing that aggressive, almost traffic cone orange that has a sort of abrasive quality to it. There's something about this particular shade that screams synthetic and cheap plastic more than it does luxurious fabric or thoughtful design. It's a color that struggles to sit harmoniously with other sophisticated tones, often clashing rather than complementing. When you see this kind of harsh orange, especially in a fabric that isn't of the highest quality, it tends to emphasize any imperfections in the garment, making seams look less precise and the overall construction appear less refined. It's a color that demands attention, but not necessarily in a good way. It grabs the eye, but then leaves it feeling a little overwhelmed, rather than impressed. Think about it. How often do you see high-end luxury brands consistently featuring this specific, harsh shade of orange in their core collections? Not often, because it lacks the subtlety and inherent elegance that defines their aesthetic. It's a difficult color to pull off with any degree of sophistication, and unless it's part of a very deliberate, avant-garde artistic statement, it usually ends up detracting from the perceived value of your outfit. If you love orange, opt for the deeper, richer, or more muted shades. Leave the harsh, in-your-face versions for safety vests, not your chic wardrobe. Washed out gray. Now, for a shade that many consider a neutral, a safe bet, and sometimes a complete wardrobe staple, gray. But not all grays are created equal, and there's one particular variety that can be an absolute style killer when it comes to projecting an expensive image. Washed out gray. I'm not talking about a beautiful charcoal, a chic dove gray, or a rich heathered gray. Those are fantastic. I'm talking about that anemic, almost tired looking gray that seems to have lost all its life and pigment. It's the kind of gray that looks like a once vibrant black item that's been subjected to countless aggressive washes, leaving it faded, flat, and completely devoid of any visual interest or depth. This specific shade often appears thin and flimsy, even in thicker fabrics, because the color itself lacks substance. It doesn't reflect light in an appealing way, and instead, it tends to absorb it, making the garment look dull and uninspired. When you wear washed out gray, it can unfortunately project an image of carelessness or a lack of attention to detail, almost as if you've just thrown on the first thing you found in your laundry pile. It's a color that doesn't inspire confidence or elegance. High-quality grays, on the other hand, have a rich, complex undertone, whether it's a hint of blue, brown, or even purple, that gives them depth and makes them feel substantial. A truly expensive gray feels intentional, carefully chosen, and sophisticated. A washed-out gray, however, just feels like an afterthought. It's a color that actively works against your efforts to look polished and put together, making even well-tailored pieces appear less valuable. Bright yellow. Let's venture into the sunny world of yellow, but with a crucial distinction. While a rich mustard yellow, a soft buttercup, or a sophisticated gold can be incredibly chic and vibrant, There's a particular shade of bright yellow that frequently misses the mark and can cheapen an entire look. Primary, almost aggressive, bright yellow. Think of that stark, unyielding yellow that screams school bus or smiley face sticker. There's an almost childlike, unsophisticated quality to this specific hue when it's translated into clothing. It lacks the nuanced complexity that characterizes more expensive color palettes. Often, the fabrics dyed in this stark yellow tend to look thinner and less luxurious, as if the intensity of the color somehow strips away the perceived quality of the material. It can also be incredibly difficult to style harmoniously with other colors, often creating jarring clashes rather than elegant combinations. This type of bright yellow has a tendency to overwhelm an outfit, making it the only thing the eye can focus on, and not necessarily in a flattering way. It's a color that can look incredibly harsh against many skin tones, making you appear washed out or sallow rather than radiant. While a carefully chosen, more refined shade of yellow can inject joy and warmth into your wardrobe, this particular bright yellow often comes across as unsophisticated and can undermine the effort you've put into creating a polished ensemble. It's a color that can feel more appropriate for children's clothing or casual accessories, rather than truly chic, elevated fashion pieces. Opt for the more subdued, earthy, or richly toned yellows to maintain that expensive aesthetic. Distressed brown. Moving on, we encounter a color that often falls prey to looking less expensive, especially when it veers into a certain territory. Distressed brown. Now, a rich, deep chocolate brown, a warm caramel, or a sophisticated tan can be incredibly elegant and foundational colors in a high-quality wardrobe. But the moment brown starts looking distressed, in an unintentional rather than an artisanal way, it's a red flag. I'm talking about those shades of brown that appear faded, scuffed, or mottled, particularly in materials like faux leather or cheaper fabrics that attempt to mimic aged textures. This isn't the beautiful patina of genuine, high-quality leather that has gracefully aged over time. No, this is the kind of brown that looks tired, almost like it's been left out in the sun for too long, or has undergone a manufacturing process that attempts to create an aged look, but just ends up making it look worn out before its time. These types of distressed browns often lack depth and richness. They appear flat and uninspired, and they certainly don't evoke the warmth or stability that a good brown should. When you wear an item in this kind of unrefined, distressed brown, it can unfortunately convey a sense of shabbiness rather than rugged chic. It undermines any efforts you make to look polished and can make even otherwise expensive pieces look significantly less valuable. The key here is the quality of the distressed look. If it's a genuine, rich, and intentional distress on a high-end material, that's one thing. But if it's a poor imitation, especially in a synthetic fabric, it's a definite no for an expensive aesthetic. Overly vibrant purple. Finally, let's talk about a color that, in its most luxurious forms, can be regal and utterly captivating, but in its less refined iterations, can be a major detractor. Overly vibrant purple. Think of those deep, rich aubergine shades, or a sophisticated lavender, even a majestic royal purple. These are stunning and project an air of opulence. The problematic purple, however, is that almost artificial, intensely bright, almost grape soda-esque shade that lacks any real depth or subtlety. It's the kind of purple that can sometimes be found in children's toys or cheap party decorations. There's a synthetic quality to this kind of vibrant purple that immediately cheapens the garment it's on. It often looks like the dye is struggling to fully penetrate the fabric, or that the pigment itself is simply not refined. This shade tends to be incredibly loud and attention-grabbing, but not in a sophisticated way. Instead, it can make an outfit look garish and less thoughtfully put together. When you see this vibrant, almost neon-like purple, it rarely conjures images of luxurious silks, fine wools, or delicate cashmeres. Instead, it often makes you think of cheaper, more mass produced synthetic materials that struggle to hold rich, complex dyes. High end purples always have a certain undertone, a hint of red, blue, or even gray that gives them a sophisticated dimension. An overly vibrant purple, on the other hand, is usually flat, one dimensional, and often clashes with other colors rather than complementing them. If you want to incorporate purple into your wardrobe and maintain an expensive look, always opt for the deeper, richer, more complex, or softer, dustier shades that exude an inherent sophistication. Steer clear of the purple that screams rather than whispers. So there you have it, the 7 colors that, without you even realizing it, might be subtly diminishing the perceived value of your wardrobe. It's not about avoiding color entirely, it's about choosing the right colors, the ones that have depth, richness, and an inherent sophistication. The next time you're shopping, or even just getting dressed, take a moment to really look at the hues you're choosing. Are they singing with elegance, or are they subtly undermining your entire aesthetic? By consciously choosing colors that elevate rather than detract, you'll not only transform your wardrobe, but also project an undeniable air of luxury and confidence, effortlessly turning heads for all the right reasons. This isn't about spending more. It's about spending smarter and making every single piece in your closet work harder for that expensive, polished vibe you're striving for.